No criminal charges will be filed against the people involved in Sunday's border clash. That's according to the Associated Press. Dozens of Central American migrants were arrested for trying to force their way into the country. Some threw rocks at Border Patrol agents who responded by using tear gas. This happened at the border between Tijuana, Mexico, and the U.S. U.S. officials will not say why they decided not to prosecute any of the migrants. Tensions at the San Isidro crossing have grown as thousands of people in the so-called migrant caravan arrived, fleeing poverty and violence in Central America. Most of them plan to seek asylum in the United States, but many will have to wait weeks or even months because the U.S. government only processes about 100 cases per day. Joining me now is New York Times immigration reporter Caitlin Dickerson. She recently co-authored an article on the long wait times migrants face on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Caitlin, thanks so much for being here. Let's start with the migrants who are waiting on the Mexico side of the border. Is that the usual process? I mean, Mexico is now setting up these tent cities for the migrants as well. Is that right?
Mexico is doing some work to help house people essentially who are waiting. And no, to answer your question, it's not the usual process. What's new under President Trump is something called metering, which means limiting the number of cases that are processed every day. So you said right now in San Isidro, that's about 100 cases a day. And of course, we see way more people than 100 show up every day and want to come and apply for asylum. In the past, you would be processed the same day you arrived, and you'd either continue on or you'd be turned away if you weren't eligible. Now we're seeing these really, really long wait times, and so Mexico has to do something to find a place to put people.
And what is the reasoning behind processing only 100 cases a day and creating these longer wait times?
That's a really good question. It's been hard to get a sort of clear answer for the purpose or the thinking behind metering out of the administration. I think they point to a few different things. They say basically they're inundated. They have far too many people that they have to deal with. And, you know, Border Patrol doesn't just process asylum seekers, but they're also trying to interdict drugs. They're also looking for human smuggling. And they basically say for too long, they've had to juggle too many different things. Resources are, beyond capacity. And so they needed to do something to limit what they were dedicating to that one issue of processing asylum seekers.
So is that clear, though, that the U.S. does not have enough resources right now on hand to process more asylum seekers, or is this just a stance that the administration is taking?
I think it's a really hard question to answer. It's absolutely the case that we're seeing large numbers of migrant families more than ever before coming to seek asylum in the United States. And so the agency that handles them has had to adjust. Whether they have too few resources, we really can only go based on what they say. And right now, that's the explanation for metering. But I think immigrant advocates are arguing they think that the long lines are being built up intentionally, that the administration wants to cause conflict for the purposes of making a stronger argument, and we really can't know.
Right. So if you could, paint us a picture for what life is like for these migrants waiting either on the Mexico side or there are tent cities on the U.S. side as well. What is their day like? How long are they expected to wait? Is there a point when many of them just give up and leave?
We haven't heard, surprisingly, of a whole lot of people giving up and leaving. I think you may see that over time as metering becomes more of a permanent fixture in the immigration process. So what life looks like is when you arrive at the border, you approach, you cross the bridge, you give your name to a border agent. They might tell you that you're number 1,256, and you say, okay, thank you, and you go back to basically these big groupings of people and try to find a place to put down your tent.
And on the Mexico side.
On the Mexico side of the border, and you hang out and you wait. And we hear stories of people who wake up every morning, at 3 or 4 or 5 a.m. and rush across the bridge there and try to see, if they can try to get through, skip the line, see if there's any wiggle room. The answer's no.
How are they even notified, though, if their number is up? I mean, they have no way of being
You have to go back and check.
You have to go back and check.
Yeah.
So there are literally hundreds of migrants going back and forth every day, checking to see if it's their turn?
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
It's not the most organized process, as you can imagine, and it's really frustrating. And so I think that's why you see episodes like the one we just talked about on Sunday where people rush the border. Some of them said that they just wanted to protest.
Right. So do you think then it does sound a little bit as if perhaps the thinking may be that enough people or a percentage of the migrants will become frustrated enough to just leave?
I mean, we know that the administration has said they want to limit the number of people who are filing asylum claims. They want to rid the process of people who have thin claims and do everything they can to discourage them from ever filing to begin with. And I think we can put metering in, the large category of new policies that have been introduced to further that goal.
And so do you have an average of how long the average migrant is waiting before their case is called into court?
Here's the problem. Before their case is called into court. So we know that immigration court proceedings on the whole will take about 2 years to process. There's a lot of variables in there, and if you're in detention, your case will be processed more quickly as those that are than those that are released from detention. In terms of how long you might wait to be processed to begin with, we're also seeing major variation there because some border stations are processing 100 people a day, but then you hear the odd story where one border station only processes 5 people a day, another one only 10 people a day, and we really don't know why.
No one's overseeing it. So once a migrant is processed, then what happens?
When they're processed, they get a credible fear interview if they're applying for asylum, and that's a really critical juncture where they have to prove that they have a chance of prevailing before a judge. 3 out of 4 people pass, and so those who do are either detained or released, and that's when they get that court date that might be in 2020.
In 2020.
And if you don't pass your credible fear interview, you go into what's called expedited removal. You can expect to be back in your home country in the next couple of weeks.
Wow, it sounds more and more like seeking asylum is an impossible dream.
There are absolutely a lot of hurdles, and we see more going up every week with the asylum ban that was introduced a couple of weeks ago, where you can only now request asylum in certain places. That was another major limiting factor, though very quickly we saw a federal judge put a temporary restraining order on that policy. Now this new idea of keeping asylum seekers in Mexico while they wait, it hasn't been introduced yet, but if it is, it'll be yet another barrier to accessing the status.
How many more barriers can there be? Is there a legal limit to the amount of barriers that the government can throw up?
There are immigration laws that are and those are what the administration is rubbing up against, right? That's what the federal judge who put a temporary restraining order on the asylum ban pointed to. So each of these policies, you can expect them to be litigated in court. Yeah. But from everything I hear from my sources in the government, every day is an exercise in coming up with a new plan.
No one can rest here,
exactly.
regardless of which side of this immigration debate you're on. Caitlin Dickerson, thank you so much for coming to see us.